Hello everyone, my name is Vincent Teo. I'm an AV reviewer and professional calibrator. Today we're taking a look at this Sony UBP-X1100ES 4K Blu-ray player, which is the successor to the outgoing X1000ES model, with the key upgrade being Dolby Vision support. The X1100 comes from Sony's professional division and so offers a number of custom install friendly features not found on the X800 Mark II, such as front display panel, analog and digital optical audio outs, removable power cord, as well as an RS-232 serial port for system integration control. For these luxuries, the Sony X1100ES will cost you an expected retail price of £799, which is more than double the price of the Sony X800 Mark II, but at least you'll also get an extended warranty of 3 years. The design is minimalistic, with subtly textured top and bottom layers sandwiching a glossy midsection. An ES logo at the right corner marks the product as belonging to Sony's premium home entertainment series, and there's a front USB port hidden behind a tethered flap which is a bit too close to the power and eject buttons if you have thick digits like ours. The connections are located at the back of the machine, including 2 HDMI ports, one of which is the full bandwidth 18 gigabits per second HDMI 2.0B AV output, the other only HDMI 1.4B for sending audio out to legacy AV equipment which doesn't support the necessary HDCP protocol. The chassis is not as tall or as heavy as the Panasonic UB9000 or Oppo 203, let alone the formidable Pioneer LX500. So while we'd say that the build quality of the Sony X1100ES is a definite step up over the X700 or X800, we wouldn't go so far as to call it tank-like. The supplied remote control is fairly lightweight too, but at least tactile feedback is well judged, making it a joy to use together with the sleek user interface. In fact, among all the high-end 4K Blu-ray players I have here, we liked Sony UX the most, allowing us to zip in and out of the menus painlessly. The X1100 also generally loads the disc the fastest once you close the tray. As you can see from the uncluttered home screen, the Sony X1100ES offers some of the most popular streaming apps such as Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and YouTube. And the good news is that 24p content from these apps will be output as 24p rather than 60p, so you shouldn't see any telescenic judder as long as your display is up to task. Unfortunately, the internal apps don't always deliver the highest quality format available, probably due to limitations of the individual apps. For example, the onboard Netflix app cannot deliver Dolby Atmos because it cannot output Dolby Digital Plus, and the YouTube app cannot display HLG HDR correctly. For the best experience, we normally advise people to use the streaming apps on the TV itself, and that's certainly the case here. Okay, enough about streaming, let's talk about physical media, because that's presumably the main reason why anyone would buy a 4K Blu-ray player. In terms of picture quality, the Sony X1100ES performed, for the most part, very similarly to the Oppo and Pioneer players that also use MediaTek's chipset. Upscaling of standard definition material, such as this SMPTE RP133 test card in 576i, was sharp and detailed, although there's a bit of overshoot and fizziness, which is common to MediaTek chipsets. To our eyes, engaging the Bravia Mode on the player in conjunction with a Sony TV cleaned up the picture very slightly. We are not really talking a night and day difference, just very marginal. From talking to Sony engineers, what the Bravia Mode does is to turn off all unnecessary video processing and send out the cleanest signal to a compatible TV, which just so happens must be a Sony TV. A coincidence on the same level as a photo of Boris Johnson randomly captured being all lovey-dovey with his girlfriend. Speaking of unnecessary processing, by default, the Sony X1100ES applies some noise reduction on non-UHD content which can kill detail and suppress film grain integrity, as you can see from our own custom-authored test pattern here. You need to switch video settings to anything other than auto to disable the noise reduction if you want to get the most pristine detail and unscathed film grain from your DVDs and 1080p Blu-rays. Because 4K Blu-ray data is stored at 420 Chroma, players generally need to upsample to 422 or 444 before sending the signal on to be displayed on the television, and the Sony X1100 fared well here. The multi-tap processing on the Panasonic UB9000 exhibited less jaggies and looked slightly richer at the periphery of this Chroma zone plate pattern, but also introduced a bit more chroma ringing on this chroma bandwidth test pattern. In real-life content, such as in this scene from Robin Hood in Vanilla HDR10, fine color detail looked a tad sharper on the Panasonic UB9000 compared with the Sony X1100ES, but it's generally splitting hairs, especially from normal viewing distances. Where the Panasonic pulled ahead was in HDR10 tone mapping and HDR to SDR conversion. The Sony X1100ES outputs HDR10 as is, so you have to completely rely on the tone mapping capabilities of your display if you are not using something like Lumagen or Matte VR in your setup. On the other hand, the Panasonic UB9000 has a fantastic HDR optimizer function that can pre-tone map HDR10 material so that it's more easily digestible by your TV or projector. In this frame from Robin Hood, again in HDR10, engaging HDR optimizer on the Panasonic would recover more specular highlight detail at the expense of some HDR impact, making the grille look less blown out by the bright sunlight without drastically affecting the overall APL or average picture level. Note that the higher the peak brightness and the better the tone mapping of your display, the less beneficial the HDR optimizer feature will be to you. The same applies to HDR to SDR conversion. The vast majority of you will never need to convert HDR to SDR. You will want to watch HDR as HDR. However, there are some projector owners out there who prefer to send SDR BT2020 signal to their projectors since it's so difficult to get impactful HDR on home theater projectors anyway due to limited light output. With SDR BT2020, these viewers can get the benefits of white color gamut without kicking their projectors into noisier high lamp mode with an elevated black floor. If SDR BT2020 output from 4K Blu-ray movies is important to you, then the Panasonic UB9000 is undoubtedly the superior choice. We couldn't even extract BT2020 from the Sony X1100ES in SDR. It would always map down to BT709. Furthermore, there's some crushing of shadow detail and color oversaturation which couldn't be completely rectified by even the brightest HDR conversion setting. Again, I stress that this is a really niche use case. Most of you won't need to convert HDR to SDR. My main gripe with the Sony X1100 is the lack of auto switching for Dolby Vision disc. To clarify, the player does support Dolby Vision, but during playback of Dolby Vision 4K Blu-rays, you will need to go into the user menu to manually switch on Dolby Vision before the player will output in Dolby Vision. Otherwise, it will be outputting in standard HDR10. And if you don't manually turn the Dolby Vision setting off after you watch the Dolby Vision movie, the UBP-X1100ES will continue to output everything in Dolby Vision, and I mean everything. SDR Blu-rays, DVDs, HDR10 films. They will all be converted to Dolby Vision by the player before being sent to the display. This is wrong on so many levels, I don't even know where to begin. As you can see from this sequence of Skyfall, which is still only available on 1080p Blu-ray at the time I filmed this video, although I understand that a 4K HDR disc is coming later in the year, when converted to Dolby Vision, the light distribution is all wrong with sickly skin tones. Converting HDR10 disc to Dolby Vision isn't anywhere near as bad, but it still appeared a touch more washed out than if HDR10 was output as HDR10. Also, any in-source posterization seemed to be exaggerated by the Dolby Vision conversion, as shown in this paused frame from Journey to the South Pacific. Besides, some televisions present Dolby Vision in a darker manner than HDR10. I'm thinking about the earlier Sony OLEDs with X1 Extreme chipsets, so you definitely don't want to send Dolby Vision signal in a fake way to these TVs if you can help it. Now, the logical workaround is to only engage Dolby Vision mode on the Sony X1100ES when watching Dolby Vision disc. then switch it off when you're watching everything else. Simple, right? Well, not quite. First, do you know which disc is in Dolby Vision and which is not? Most Dolby Vision discs are not clearly labeled. I didn't even realize that Paddington 2 was in Dolby Vision until I popped it into my Oppo 203 and it auto-switched to Dolby Vision. Looking on the 4K Blu-ray case, there's only a small logo indicating that it's in Dolby Vision. Another example is the 4K Blu-ray of Black Panther. For some reason, I ended up buying 2 copies. I bought the first in an HMV 2 for £30 sale, didn't find time to watch it. Then in the next HMV 2 for £30 sale, I totally forgot I already owned the disc and bought it again. My memory isn't what it used to be, but at least my taste is consistent. So, Black Panther. I totally didn't know that it was in Dolby Vision until I started playing it on the Oppo 203. There's nothing on the case, no logo, no wording to say that it's in Dolby Vision. My point is, if you don't know whether a disc is in Dolby Vision or not, how can you correctly engage Dolby Vision mode on the Sony X1100 as required? And then there's the inconvenience of having to go into the user menu to manually turn on Dolby Vision and remembering to turn it off afterwards. My other half already starts moaning every time I pick up the remote. This would just tip her over the edge. Dude, can I borrow your remote control afterwards? I've been trying to get my wife to moan for ages. One final word about the Dolby Vision output on the Sony X1100ES. It appeared to clip some of the brightest specular highlight detail, such as the sun in this scene from The Fate of the Furious. This behavior is similar to the Dolby Vision output on the Panasonic UB9000 and the Pioneer LX500, meaning that the Oppo 203 is the only 4K Blu-ray player we've tested to date that doesn't blow out specular highlight detail in Dolby Vision mode. To clarify, the Dolby Vision displays we are using in our comparisons have been calibrated in the most accurate picture preset. So if Dolby is open to dialogue, I want to ask them, why is this happening? Which output is correct and which is wrong? And why are we getting different Dolby Vision outputs from different players? This inconsistency totally goes against Dolby Vision's supposed end-to-end premium HDR solution that's meant to preserve artistic intent better than rival HDR technologies, and we would love to hear Dolby Laboratories' explanation. To test audio, we hooked up the Sony X1100ES through a Marantz receiver to a pair of Polk Audio S15E speakers. They are really quite fantastic bookshelves for the money, by the way, and the player sounded great, although not as stunning as the more expensive and musically talented Pioneer LX500. Of course, the Sony plays SACD and DVD audio, which the Panasonic UB9000 doesn't. Another neat trick up the sleeve of the Sony X1100ES is to output the audio to Bluetooth headphones or wireless speakers. To sum up, the Sony UBP-X1100ES delivers high-quality picture and sound. The image quality is similar to other high-end MediaTek-based players such as the Oppo 203 and Pioneer LX500. Just make sure to turn off noise reduction, which is enabled by default out of the box. The major shortcoming is the lack of Dolby Vision auto-switching, and we hope that Sony can listen to our constructive feedback and explore the possibility of fixing this in a firmware update. In the meantime, we can recommend the Sony X1100ES if you don't mind enabling Dolby Vision manually, though the Sony X800 Mark II would probably provide better value for money, but then we will dearly miss the front panel display on the X1100. If you found this video useful, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.